The November wind cuts through San Francisco like a blade wrapped in ice. Dead leaves scatter across the sidewalk outside Mercer's Italian restaurant, swirling in patterns that mean nothing, carrying no weight, moving only because the cold forces them forward. Sofia Hartley stands frozen in that wind at 11:53 p.m., her black and white Maid uniform thin as paper against the darkness. Her hands shake as she clutches her purse. Inside that purse sits $34. That is all the money she has left in the entire world. $34. Her rent is due in 5 days. The room she rents, smaller than most closets, with a window that does not open and pipes that groan through the night, costs $420 a month. She has been short twice this year already. Catherine Mercer, the owner of the restaurant, has made it clear there will not be a third time. But Catherine has also made it clear that every broken glass, every spilled water pitcher, every table that complains about the service comes out of Sofia's paycheck. Last week a man ordered wine and changed his mind after the first sip. Catherine docked Sofia $40. She had nothing to do with that wine. It did not matter. $34 is not enough for anything. The cold bites at her cheeks. Her fingers have gone numb. She should go back inside, should finish wiping down the last of the tables, should collect whatever tips the evening shift did not already claim. But her feet will not move. Her body has learned that sometimes the best thing to do is to become very still and very small. Then she hears the engine. It is the kind of sound that carries its own weight, a car pulling up to the curb, heavy and deliberate. A black sedan with tinted windows and chrome that catches the streetlight. The door opens before the car has fully stopped. Douglas Hale emerges first, and behind him comes a man Sofia does not recognize. Douglas is 47 years old, with the kind of face that has been worn smooth by anger and shaped hard by the kind of life where people who say no do not say anything for very long. He works security at a casino 3 blocks away. 3 years ago, Sofia borrowed money from him. Just small amounts at first. $20 here. $50 there. Just to eat. Just to keep the apartment. The loans came with interest that seemed reasonable in the moment, and then the interest compounded, and then the numbers stopped making sense. Now Douglas says she owes him $35,000. She knows this number is wrong. She has done the math in her head so many times that the numbers have worn grooves into her thoughts like water wearing down stone. She has paid him almost $8,000 in the past 3 years. Almost $8,000. But somehow the debt has doubled. Douglas explained the mathematics to her once. She did not understand. When she asked him to explain again, he stopped talking and instead showed her his fist, and she stopped asking questions after that. Now he walks toward her across the empty sidewalk, and his companion follows like a shadow that walks on 2 legs. You think you can hide in this place? Douglas's voice carries the weight of all the anger he has been storing. You think serving fancy wine to rich people makes you different? Makes you able to forget what you owe me? Sofia opens her mouth. No words come out. The cold has frozen her voice somewhere deep in her chest. He grabs her wrist. His hand is large and his grip is the kind of certain that tells her there is no possibility of escape. He pulls her toward the alley beside the restaurant, the narrow space between brick walls where the trash bins sit and where deliveries arrive in the dark hours before dawn. The concrete is slick with water. Dead leaves have accumulated in the corners like nature's own trash pile. 3 days, he says, dragging her deeper into that darkness. You have 3 days to get me $35,000 or we are going to have a very serious conversation about what happens to people who steal from Douglas Hale. She stumbles. Her shoulder hits the brick wall hard, and pain shoots through her upper back like electricity, like fire, like something that wants to tear her apart from the inside. 8 years ago, when she was 22 and living in a shelter for women, her ex-boyfriend used to beat her in patterns, never the face, always the back, always the places no one would see. He stopped when she ran. He has not found her in 8 years. But the scars remain. Pink and white lines that map out the geography of every time his hands became fists. They ache when the cold comes. They ache now. Douglas does not see these scars. He does not know they exist. But Sofia feels them. She always feels them. Then everything goes silent. Not the kind of silence that is just the absence of sound. The kind of silence that is itself a presence, a weight, something that presses down on the world and changes it fundamentally. Even the wind seems to pause. Even the distant traffic noise fades away. A man's voice cuts through that silence like a knife cutting through the air. Let her go. The voice is not loud. This is what makes it so terrifying. It carries no need to be loud. It carries its own authority, its own certainty, the kind of certainty that comes from a life lived in the spaces where other people's decisions do not matter anymore. Aleandro Calabrese stands 10 feet away at the mouth of the alley, silhouetted against the light spilling from the restaurant windows. Cigarette smoke curls from his lips in elegant spirals. His dark eyes reflect the streetlight like a predator's eyes reflect flame. He is 6'2". His suit costs more than Sofia's entire annual salary. This fact is written into every seam, every perfectly placed button, every inch of fabric that was cut and assembled by hands that knew what they were doing. The suit is charcoal gray. His shirt is white and open at the collar, revealing a chest that is broad and scarred. A thin scar runs from his left eye down to his cheekbone, a pale line on otherwise dark skin. He wears a watch on his left wrist that catches the light. Gold. Real gold. Worth more money than Sofia has seen in her entire life. Behind him emerge 2 other men. Bruno is built like a stone wall, with shoulders that are wide enough to block out the sky. Enzo is leaner but carries himself with the kind of danger that comes from being smart in addition to being strong. Their hands move toward their jackets with the kind of practice motion that tells Sofia they have done this before, that their bodies know the geography of weapons the way her body knows the geography of pain. Douglas does not know who this man is. Sofia does. She cleaned his private booth at Mercer's restaurant 2 hours ago. She watched him sit with 2 other men, all of them dressed in suits that cost money she will never understand. They ordered wine that came from Italy, that had been aged in cellars for decades, that tasted like something beyond the reach of people like her. She poured the wine. She cleared the plates. She remained invisible, the way she has learned to remain invisible in all the places she has worked, in all the spaces where people with money move through the world as though people like her are just part of the furniture. She cleaned the table after they left and found $100 bill folded under the napkin. She stared at that bill for so long that her supervisor asked if something was wrong. It was the first time anyone had left her such a generous tip. She folded it carefully and placed it in her purse. That $100 lasted her a week and a half. But what she does not know, what she cannot possibly know as she stands in this alley with her wrist being held by Douglas Hale, is that Aleandro Calabrese has been watching her since that moment 3 days ago. 3 days ago, Emma Calabrese collapsed on a playground 3 blocks from the restaurant. She was 8 years old, and her body simply stopped working. Just like that. One moment she was playing with other children, and the next moment she fell to the ground like someone had cut the strings holding her up. She was unconscious for 2 hours. The doctors could not explain what happened. The tests came back normal. She woke up confused and afraid. Aleandro had not been there when it happened. He was in a meeting when his security team called. By the time he arrived at the hospital, Emma was conscious again, sitting in a pediatric hospital room with her grandmother, who was crying softly into her hands. But before that, in the minutes between Emma collapsing and Aleandro's arrival, something else happened. A woman in a black and white Maid uniform came running toward Emma, running toward a stranger's child, running without hesitation into the situation. Sofia Hartley held Emma steady. She spoke to her in a voice that was soft and careful. She did not panic. She did not scream. She simply stayed with the child, her hands gentle, her presence calm. When the ambulance arrived, Sofia stepped back. When Aleandro arrived and saw his daughter awake and safe, Sofia was already fading into the background, becoming invisible again, the way she always does. But Aleandro had seen her hands. He had seen the gentleness in them, the kind of gentleness that does not come from a soft life. The kind of gentleness that comes from knowing pain intimately and choosing not to pass that pain forward to others. He had seen her, and something in his chest that had been locked for many years had opened, just a little, just enough to let light in. "I will not ask again," Aleandro says now, and his voice is like thunder. Deep and solid like an oath. Like something that, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. "Let her go." Douglas releases Sofia's wrist immediately. He does not think. He does not hesitate. He simply lets go, because his body understands what his mind has not yet fully processed, that the man standing before him is not someone who makes requests. That the men behind him are not bodyguards but enforcements. That whatever is happening in this moment has already been decided by forces far beyond anything Douglas Hale can influence. Sofia stumbles forward. Her wrist throbs where Douglas's fingers have left red marks that will turn to bruises by morning. She looks at Aleandro, and his eyes meet hers, and in that moment something shifts in the world. Something that was broken recognizes something that has the power to fix it. Something invisible recognizes someone who can make it visible again. But she does not understand what she is seeing. She does not understand yet what this moment means. She only knows that the cold is still biting at her skin, that her body still aches, that somewhere in her purse sits $34, and that 3 days from now, Douglas Hale is going to come back with more men and more violence and a list of demands she cannot possibly meet. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone you love and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now, let us go back. Back to the beginning of that day. Back to the moment before Douglas's car pulled up to the curb. Back to understand how a woman with $34 to her name and a crime boss worth millions ended up standing in the same alley on the worst night of either of their lives. 72 hours earlier. Monday morning at 6:41 a.m., when the world was still dark and most people were still sleeping, Sofia Hartley sat on the edge of a mattress that occupied nearly the entire floor of her room and counted money with trembling fingers. $67. Not enough. Never enough. The room itself was smaller than most closets, a single window that faced a dumpster, water stains blooming across the walls like flowers growing in concrete, a radiator that clanked and hissed but never actually produced heat. The walls were so thin she could hear her neighbor's television through the plaster, could hear the couple next door arguing in Spanish, could hear the city breathing just beyond the glass. She arranged the bills in a line on the mattress. Counted them again. The math did not change. Rent was $450. Due Friday. She had 67. Her throat tightened as she calculated the remainder, $180 for food this month, another $15 for bus fare, soap for laundry, the phone bill that she kept active because Douglas might call, because ignoring Douglas Hale was a mistake people only made once. The radiator clanked again, a sound like a hammer striking metal, and Sofia flinched. She was 29 years old but looked closer to 40. Her hands were calloused from 8 years of cleaning other people's homes, her eyes held the particular exhaustion of someone who had learned to sleep with one ear listening for danger. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a braid so tight it pulled at her temples. She wore a faded t-shirt with a hole near the collar and sweatpants that had been washed so many times the fabric had begun to thin. On the nightstand beside her mattress sat 3 items, a bottle of water, a phone that buzzed with text she did not read, and a pair of small white shoes. Infant shoes. Size 0 to 3 months. The leather was creased from being held so many times, from being turned over and over in hands that needed something to hold onto during the nights when sleep would not come. Those shoes had traveled with her through the shelter. Through the streets. Through every place she had ever lived. She did not know why she kept them. She knew only that she could not throw them away. Sofia scooped the money back into her envelope and slid it into the inner pocket of her jacket. She dressed in the dark, her movements efficient and quiet, the movements of someone who had learned long ago to take up as little space as possible. The bus to Mercer's Italian restaurant took 32 minutes. She rode in the back, pressed against the window, watching the city transform as the sun began to climb. The neighborhood shifted from gray concrete and chain-link fences to tree-lined streets with brownstone facades. From one world to another. From the place where people like Sofia lived to the place where people like the Mercers worked. She arrived at the restaurant at 7:28 a.m. The doors would not open to customers for another 4 hours, but Catherine Mercer believed that restaurants required constant attention, constant perfection, constant surveillance of the invisible people who made perfection possible. Sofia changed into her uniform in the employee room, black dress, white apron, black shoes that pinched her toes. The other maids were already moving through the dining room like ghosts, polishing silverware, straightening the white tablecloths, ensuring that every candlestick was positioned at precisely the correct angle. Rosa had worked at Mercer's for 14 years. Lynn for 11. Sofia, despite working double shifts more often than not, had never been granted anything beyond the bare minimum wage and the understanding that she was replaceable, that Catherine Mercer could find someone new by the end of the day if Sofia ever had the audacity to ask for more. "Catherine's in a mood today," Rosa whispered as Sofia began wiping down the bar. "She docked Maria $40 yesterday for a water spot on a glass." Sofia nodded. She did not speak. She had learned that the less attention she attracted, the safer she remained. At 3:15 p.m., during her break, Sofia sat in the alley behind the restaurant with a sleeve of crackers she had bought for $1.89. She rationed them, eating 3 at a time, spacing them out so the food would last longer. The alley smelled like stale grease and rotting vegetables. A rat the size of a cat scurried past the dumpster. Her phone buzzed. Douglas Hale. 12 missed calls across 2 days. She did not answer. The phone buzzed again. And again. And again. Douglas Hale was patient in the way that dangerous men are patient, the patience of someone who knew that eventually, inevitably, you would run out of places to hide, you would run out of phone credit, you would run out of reasons not to pick up. 3 years ago, he had offered her money. Just $5,000, he had said. Easy money. A personal loan. The kind of thing friends did for each other. She had been desperate, her mother's hospital bills were stacking up, the eviction notice had arrived that morning, and Douglas had smiled at her across a coffee shop table and made it sound like salvation. She had signed the paperwork he produced from his briefcase. She had not read the fine print. By the time she understood what she had signed, the $5,000 had become $7,000. Then $10,000. Then, through a system of penalties and compound interest that existed nowhere in any legitimate financial system, $35,000. He came to collect. He brought friends. He explained, with extraordinary patience, that the timeline for repayment had moved up. That she now owed $35,000 in 3 days. She had $75 total in the world. The phone buzzed again. Sofia deleted the notification and continued eating her crackers. What changed everything was the sound. A child's scream, sharp and terrified, cutting through the ambient noise of the city. It came from the playground across the street from the restaurant, the small neighborhood park where children played while their nannies watched from park benches, sipping coffee and checking their phones. Sofia did not think. She did not calculate the probability of getting in trouble for leaving during her shift. She simply stood up, dropped the half-finished sleeve of crackers, and ran toward the sound. The screaming had stopped, which was somehow worse than if it had continued. Worse because silence meant something had already gone wrong, meant emergency had already shifted from potential to realized. She found the child on the wood chips beneath the monkey bars. A girl, maybe 8 years old, with dark curly hair and skin the color of honey. She was pale, frighteningly pale, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. Other mothers stood back, creating a circle of space around her, whispering urgently into their phones, afraid to touch her, afraid to make it worse. Sofia knelt beside her without hesitation. "Sweetie, can you hear me? I'm here. You're safe. What is your name?" The girl's eyes fluttered open. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma. That's a beautiful name. I'm Sofia. I'm going to stay right here with you while we wait for help. Can you feel my hand?" Sofia took the girl's small hand in her own, pressed her other palm gently to the child's forehead. The skin was cold and clammy. "Everyone else leaves," Emma whispered. "I'm not leaving. I promise." Sofia removed her jacket, the only one she owned, thin and worn, and draped it over the child's small body. She held her hand steady and kept speaking, kept the child focused on the sound of her voice. "Tell me about something you love. What makes you happy?" "My father," Emma said softly. "And colors. I like all the colors. Those are wonderful things to love." 7 minutes later, the black Mercedes screeched to the curb with a sound like a gunshot in the afternoon air. Doors opened. A man emerged who seemed to carry darkness with him, like a cloud that had learned to walk on two legs. Aleandro Calabrese was 6'2", with shoulders that filled the space of a doorway, with the kind of presence that made people unconsciously step backward. He wore a suit that cost more than Sofia made in 3 months, and his eyes, dark, penetrating, the color of storm clouds before they break, immediately found his daughter. His voice broke when he spoke, which was something that probably never happened to him, something that probably shocked everyone who heard it. "Emma? Emma, baby, look at me." Emma's eyes opened wider. "Papa. I'm here. I'm here now. You're going to be okay." He knelt beside Sofia, his expensive suit pressing against the wood chips, and his hands moved over his daughter with the gentleness of someone who had learned to be careful, who understood that broken things require hands that do not crush them further. "Which hospital?" he asked Sofia, not looking at her yet, his entire attention on his child. "I don't know," Sofia said. "But she needs oxygen. Her breathing." "St. Mary's is 3 blocks away," one of the mothers called out nervously. Aleandro lifted Emma carefully. He turned to Sofia for the first time. His eyes met hers and held them, and the world seemed to pause in that moment. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. 2 words that contained something Sofia could not name, something that felt like it mattered in a way that most things did not. Sofia nodded, stepped back, expected nothing. She did not know that a man like Aleandro Calabrese never forgot a face. She did not know that she had just been seen by someone who had the power to change everything. She knew only that a child had been afraid, and she had stayed, and that mattered. She watched the black Mercedes pull away from the curb. She watched it disappear into the city. And then she walked back to Mercer's Italian restaurant, back to her invisibility, back to the place where she wiped tables and poured water and remained, as she had always remained, nobody at all. The back alley behind Mercer's Italian restaurant smelled like rotting vegetables and broken dreams. Sofia Hartley's breath came in small clouds, visible in the November cold, as she counted the crumpled bills in her palm one more time. $34. That was all that remained after Catherine Mercer had docked half her tips, claiming a house-cut increase that didn't exist. $34 to last until Friday. $34 between her and nothing. The dead leaves scattered across the concrete like whispers, and she heard the footsteps before she saw him. Heavy. Deliberate. The kind of footsteps that didn't care who heard them coming. Douglas Hale stepped out of the shadows by the dumpster. He was bigger than she remembered from 6 months ago, broader across the shoulders, harder in the face. His smile was casual, but his eyes were not. "Hey, baby," he said. "Miss me?" Sofia's back pressed flat against the brick wall. The old scars across her shoulders began to ache, muscle memory responding to danger the way bodies do when they've learned pain intimately. "Douglas. I didn't know you'd. Didn't expect me." He stepped closer, closing the distance between them like a predator measuring prey. "That's the problem, Sofia. You keep not expecting things. Like consequences." His voice was smooth. That was the terrible part. Men who screamed were easier to predict. Douglas Hale was the kind of dangerous that came wrapped in casualness, in a tone that sounded almost friendly while discussing things that would break you. "You owe me $35,000, he said. 3 years of loans. 3 years of interest. 3 years of me being patient while you play restaurant maid like your life is something normal." Sofia's voice barely made it out as a whisper. I'm paying you back every month, Douglas. $200 every single month since I left. You know I am. Douglas laughed. The sound echoed off the alley walls like something sharp. $200 a month? At that rate, Sofia, you'll be 70 years old before you've paid me back. Ancient. Used up. Nobody's going to want you by then anyway. He reached out, his fingers moving toward her cheek. I want it all. Friday. Midnight. $35,000, in cash, or I come collect in other ways. The implication hung in the cold air between them. Sofia had lived with Douglas's implications for 3 years. She knew exactly what other ways meant. I don't have that kind of money, she said. The words came out broken. I'm doing everything I can. I work 6 days a week, sometimes 7. There's no way. Then you better find a way. Douglas dropped his hand. He stepped back, giving her space that felt like a threat in itself. 3 days, Sofia. Friday midnight. And don't think about running again. You run, I find you. You hide, I burn down every restaurant that would hire you. Catherine already promised me that much. You're trapped, baby. That's the beautiful part. You can't escape. He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the sound of distant traffic and the hum of the restaurant's kitchen exhaust fan. Sofia waited until she couldn't hear him anymore. Then she slid down the brick wall until she was sitting on the cold concrete, her knees pulled to her chest, and counted the $34 again. The bills had not multiplied. They never did. Through the kitchen window, she could see into Mercer's dining room. Aleandro Calabrese sat in his private booth, the corner table where the important men gathered every Thursday night. Candlelight caught the sharp planes of his face, caught the expensive fabric of his tailored suit, caught the way his dark eyes moved across the room like he was cataloguing everything, everyone, the exact distance between power and vulnerability. Bruno and Enzo flanked the booth entrance, their presence a message: this man was not to be disturbed. Sofia watched him for 2 seconds. Then she pressed her forehead against her knees and tried not to think about what Friday midnight would bring. Inside the restaurant, Catherine Mercer ended a phone call. The device pressed against her ear was worth more than Sofia's monthly rent. She stood in her office, all mahogany and leather, and smiled a smile that would have chilled anyone who truly understood what it meant. She had just given Douglas Hale written permission to collect his debt on restaurant property. She had just ensured that Sofia would work double shifts without complaint for months, would be desperate enough to accept the Sunday house cleaning job at $40 a day, would be too broken to question anything. Catherine Mercer loved leverage. It was cleaner than violence, more efficient than threats. Leverage meant you never had to get your hands dirty. The next morning arrived grey and heavy, the sky pressing down like a lid. Sofia moved through Mercer's dining room like a ghost, polishing silverware at Aleandro's private booth with movements so automatic they required no thought. Her hands worked while her mind did the mathematics that had become her constant companion. 35,000 divided by 34. Impossible. 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 Catherine's heels clicked across the marble floor. She was a woman built entirely of edges, sharp cheekbones, sharp voice, the kind of beauty that had learned early to become a weapon. She stopped beside Sofia, and her smile was all sweetness, which meant it was all poison. I heard Douglas came by last night, Catherine said. Such a shame about your situation. You must be absolutely terrified. Sofia's hands kept moving. Don't look up. Don't react. Don't give her the satisfaction. It's handled, Ms. Mercer. Catherine's laugh was a knife wrapped in silk. Oh, I'm sure it is. You know what, Sofia? If you ever need extra shifts to help with your circumstances, I'm happy to accommodate. We could work out a payment plan. Maybe you clean my house on Sundays? My car needs detailing. My bathroom needs a professional touch. I'll pay you $40 a day. Sofia did the math without meaning to. $40 times 30 days was $1,200. At that rate, it would take her 2 years to earn $35,000. But she nodded, because what else could she do? Yes, Ms. Mercer. Thank you. Catherine leaned down, close enough that Sofia could smell her perfume. Expensive, cloying, overwhelming. And Sofia? Douglas mentioned you might try to run. I told him you wouldn't dare. You're too smart for that. After all, where would you go? I know people at every restaurant in this city. One phone call from me and you're unemployable. Finished. Nobody would touch you. The word landed like a blow. Nobody. That's what she was. What she had always been. Sofia nodded again, and Catherine walked away, diamonds glittering against her throat. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Sofia took her 15-minute break in the back office, a cramped room with filing cabinets and a single chair that smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. She pulled her purse into her lap and retrieved the object she kept closest to her heart. A pair of tiny white sneakers, yellowed with age, sized for a foot that had never walked. She had held these shoes the night she left the women's shelter 12 years ago, when she was 17 years old and pregnant and absolutely certain that she would not survive. The baby had not survived either. But she had. And she kept the shoes because they were the only proof that she had tried, that she had believed in something, that she had loved something enough to want to protect it. The office door opened without a knock. Aleandro Calabrese filled the doorway. He was taller than he appeared from across the dining room, broader in the shoulders, his presence somehow darker in this small space. He wore a suit that probably cost more than everything Sofia owned. A gold watch caught the fluorescent light. His eyes were the color of storm clouds before they break. Sofia scrambled to her feet, shoving the shoes back into her purse. Mr. Calabrese, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here, I didn't. Sit, please. His voice was quiet. Somehow that made it worse than if he had shouted. Sofia Saturday. Aleandro closed the door behind him and sat in the only other chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and smoke and something she couldn't name. Close enough that she could see the small scar running from his left eyebrow toward his temple, the kind of scar that came from a blade or a fall or a lesson learned violently. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about you, he said. Emma. She tells everyone about the kind lady at the playground. She wants to see you again. Sofia's eyes stung. She blinked hard. She's a beautiful child. You're very lucky. You were kind to her, Aleandro continued. You didn't have to stay with her. Most people would have called an ambulance and left. But you stayed. Why? She was scared, Sofia said. The words came out before she could stop them. I know what that feels like. Aleandro's expression shifted. Something ancient and knowing crossed his features, something that suggested he understood exactly what she meant, exactly which kind of fear lived inside her ribs. I grew up in poverty, Sofia. My father had fists like hammers. He beat me until I learned how to be invisible, until I understood that survival meant keeping my head down and my mouth shut and never, ever asking for anything. Sofia's breath caught in her throat. I clawed my way out of that life, Aleandro said. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something like old pain preserved in amber. I swore that no child would ever suffer the way I suffered. That's why Emma means everything to me. And that's why I notice when someone shows her genuine kindness. When someone risks something for a stranger's child. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and set it on the desk between them. If you ever need help, you call that number. Anytime. Day or night. No questions asked. Sofia stared at the card like it might transform into something else if she looked away. Aleandro Calabrese. A phone number. An address in Pacific Heights that probably had more square footage than the building where she lived. Why would you help me? She whispered. I'm nobody. Aleandro stood. His presence filled the tiny room like smoke. You're the woman who held my daughter when she was afraid. That makes you somebody to me. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Sofia stared at the card for 5 minutes. Then 10. Her hands trembled as she tucked it into her purse, next to the tiny shoes, next to the $34 that had somehow become the most and least important things she owned. She didn't believe in rescue. But at that moment, in that cramped office with the fluorescent lights humming their electric song, something shifted in the world. A door had opened that she didn't know existed. And even though she didn't believe in rescue, she was beginning to understand that belief and reality were two very different things. The October wind carries the smell of rain that hasn't fallen yet. Sofia Hartley presses her back against the brick wall of the alley beside Mercer's Italian restaurant, and the rough surface ignites 8 years of memory. 8 years of scars mapped across her spine like a chronicle of violence. Her wrist throbs where Douglas Hale's fingers dug in, fingers that know exactly how hard to squeeze without leaving marks visible to a casual observer. His fist pulls back. The same fist that taught her what worthlessness feels like. The same fist that has visited her body more times than she can count. She closes her eyes. Then a voice cuts through the cold like a blade wrapped in ice. Let her go. Sofia's eyes snap open. Aleandro Calabrese stands 15 feet away, cigarette smoke curling from his lips, his dark eyes fixed on Douglas's hand. The whole world stops. The restaurant entrance goes absolutely silent. Waiters freeze mid-step in the doorway. Patrons stop talking mid-sentence. Catherine Mercer's satisfied smile evaporates from her face. Even the traffic noise on the street seems to fade. Only the wind continues, dry and bitter, dead leaves skittering across the pavement. Douglas laughs, still gripping Sofia's wrist. His confidence is armor made of stupidity. Who the hell are you? Mind your business. Aleandro drops his cigarette. The ember dies against the concrete with a small hiss. He takes 3 steps forward, measured, deliberate, each movement controlled like a general surveying a battlefield. Bruno and Enzo emerge from the shadows behind him, their hands moving inside their jackets. Bruno is 47 years old, built like a stone fortress, with a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone. Enzo is younger, mid-30s, with dark hair slicked back and a gold watch worth more than Sofia's annual salary. I'm going to say this once, Aleandro says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. Let her go. Douglas's grip tightens. He's playing tough now, a man who borrowed money he couldn't repay, who took out loans at 400% interest, who learned long ago that violence is the only language people listen to. Or what? Douglas says. You'll call the cops? She owes me money. I have every right. Aleandro moves closer. His eyes don't blink. His voice drops to a whisper that somehow carries across the entire street. I know what you are, Douglas Hale. I know about the 12 women you've put in the hospital. I know about the restraining order you violated 4 times. I know exactly where you live. I know what you did to her. Douglas's face goes pale. His hand loosens on Sofia's wrist. I'll break every bone in your hand right here on the street, Aleandro continues. His tone is conversational, which somehow makes it more terrifying. Or you can let her go. Right now. Douglas releases Sofia. She stumbles backward, gasping, her arm throbbing where his fingers left their temporary marks. Catherine Mercer's voice rings from the restaurant doorway, desperate and shrill. Now wait just a minute, Mr. Calabrese. This is between Sofia and her creditor. We can't just. Aleandro turns to face her. Catherine's words die in her throat like a candle in the wind. His expression hasn't changed, but something in his eyes has shifted. Something cold and dangerous. You gave him permission to come here, Aleandro says. You've been stealing her wages. You use her desperation like a leash. Catherine's confidence cracks like thin ice. I don't know what she told you, but this is my restaurant, and I have every right. Aleandro pulls out his phone. 1 call. 30 seconds of conversation conducted in a voice too quiet for anyone to hear. He ends the call and looks directly at Catherine. You're finished. Everything I discovered about your embezzlement, the money you stole from your husband, your boyfriend in Napa, it's all being sent to the appropriate authorities within the hour. Unless you resign tomorrow and repay every dollar you took from every worker in this restaurant. A black SUV pulls up to the curb. The back door opens. 4 men in dark suits emerge, their movements synchronized like dancers who have practiced the same choreography 1,000 times. Douglas realizes too late what is happening. Wait, we can talk about this, he says. His voice cracks like breaking glass. The men grab him. His screams pierce the October air. You can't do this. Someone call the police. The entire street watches. No one moves. No one calls anyone. Douglas is dragged into the SUV. The door closes. The vehicle pulls away and disappears into the San Francisco night. He will never be seen again. He will spend the next 40 years in federal prison, a sentence that will be announced in courthouses across 3 counties, his crimes meticulously documented and displayed for the public record to see. Catherine Mercer backs toward the restaurant entrance. Her designer heels click against the concrete like a countdown. This is illegal. I'll report this, Aleandro's laugh is cold, like winter wind through an empty building. Report it to who, Catherine? Your husband? The one you're embezzling from? Or maybe the IRS? I'm sure they'd love to see your real books. Catherine's face goes white. The blood drains from her cheeks. She trembles, actually trembles, like a woman watching her entire world collapse in real time. Bruno holds up a folder, thick with documents that contain evidence of every transaction, every stolen dollar, every lie. Catherine turns and runs into the restaurant. The door swings shut behind her. The waiters slowly resume moving. The patrons slowly resume their conversations. The moment breaks like tension releasing from a coiled spring. Sofia stands against the brick wall, shaking. Her mind cannot process what just happened. One moment she was being dragged toward the alley, expecting to feel Douglas's fist against her ribs. The next moment 2 powerful men had been erased from her life like mistakes being corrected. Aleandro approaches her slowly, his hands visible, making no sudden movements. His suit is charcoal gray, tailored to perfection, with an open white shirt showing his chest. A gold watch glints on his wrist. A thin scar runs from his right eye to his cheekbone, a map of his own survival. Are you hurt? He asks. Sofia cannot speak. Cannot breathe. Cannot understand why a man worth millions just destroyed 2 people for a maid with $34 in her purse and shoes that don't fit right. Sofia. Look at me, Aleandro says gently. She meets his eyes. They are dark, penetrating, the color of a storm sky at dusk. In them she sees something she has never seen before, a man looking at her like she matters. Why? She whispers. Aleandro's expression shifts. Something raw breaks through. Because 15 years ago, I was where you are now. Beaten. Desperate. Convinced I deserved it. Someone showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer. I swore if I ever had power, I'd use it to make sure no one suffered like I did. Especially not someone who protected my child. Tears stream down Sofia's face. 8 years of hidden abuse. 8 years of believing she was worthless. 8 years of scars on her back like a map of hell. And in one night, it's over. Aleandro pulls out an envelope. His fingers are steady. Inside is $35,000. Consider your debt paid. Also a letter of recommendation. You don't work for Catherine anymore. Sofia stares at the envelope like it might transform into something else if she looks away. I can't take this. Yes, you can, Aleandro says. And you will. Because you saved my daughter, Sofia. And I saved the people who save mine. Bruno brings the Mercedes around, a black sedan that costs more than the building where Sofia lives. Aleandro opens the passenger door. Let me drive you home. It's not safe for you here tonight. Sofia hesitates, then gets in the car. The leather seats smell like expensive cologne and wood smoke. The engine purrs to life. Through the rear window, she watches Mercer's Italian restaurant disappear into the San Francisco night. The candlelit dining room where powerful men ordered wine worth more than her monthly salary. The kitchen where she scrubbed dishes for minimum wage. The walk-in freezer where she counted $34 and wondered how she would survive until Friday. All of it is gone now. All of it belongs to her past. But what she doesn't yet understand is that this is not the end. This is the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. Within hours, Aleandro Calabrese has made her the most protected woman in San Francisco. The woman who held his daughter. The woman worth destroying empires for. The woman who was about to discover what it feels like to be rescued by a man who understands the cost of silence and the price of violence. The Mercedes turns left onto Pacific Avenue. Rain begins to fall. Not the rain that brings cleansing or relief, but the rain that comes before a storm, heavy and cold, each drop hitting the windshield like a tiny accusation. Sofia pulls the envelope close to her chest. Inside is money. Inside is a future. Inside is proof that she was not invisible after all. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. 3 weeks later, Sofia stands in her new apartment with walls that don't have water stains and windows that overlook a quiet street instead of dumpsters. The rent is paid for 6 months. Aleandro called it a loan when he handed her the envelope, but they both knew it was something else entirely. It was a beginning. She runs her hand along the kitchen counter, still marveling that she has a kitchen. A real one. With cabinet space and a refrigerator that doesn't hum like a dying animal. Her bank account holds $2,847. The number feels impossible. Dangerous. Like if she looks away, it will vanish. The manager at her new restaurant, Lucia's on Columbus Avenue, doesn't dock wages. The other staff members learn her name on the first day. Her apron stays clean because she serves food instead of scrubbing it off dishes 12 hours a day. $18 an hour. The mathematics of survival have fundamentally shifted. The letter of recommendation sits framed on her nightstand. Aleandro's handwriting is precise and powerful, each letter exactly where it belongs. He wrote of her reliability, her character, her capacity for kindness under pressure. The letterhead carries weight in San Francisco. Doors that were locked opened instantly. On Saturdays, Emma comes to visit. Aleandro brings her at 2 o'clock, a routine so reliable that Sofia sets a timer to have coffee ready by 1:45. He never stays long, 20 minutes, perhaps 30, and he never pushes for more than what Sofia freely gives. He sits in her small kitchen and tells her about his childhood in ways he's never told anyone. His father beat him starting when he was 5 years old. Not angry beatings, but methodical ones, designed to teach a lesson about the world. The lesson was simple: weakness gets devoured. By the time Aleandro was 12, he had learned to absorb pain without flinching. By 16, he had decided that he would never feel powerless again. He clawed his way out of the Tenderloin district through methods he doesn't specify. She doesn't ask. Sofia understands that some scars exist for reasons people choose not to name. She tells him about Douglas. 8 years of it. The way her body learned to make itself smaller. The way she practiced smiling when he came home, trying to predict his mood from the angle of his shoulders as he walked through the door. The way she stopped believing she deserved anything different. She shows him the scars on her back for the first time. They sit in her tiny kitchen and they understand each other in a way that needs no translation. Two people who learned survival before they learned anything else. Two people whose bodies are maps of everything they endured. One Saturday, Emma falls asleep on Sofia's couch while watching cartoons. Her small body curls into the corner, her breathing deep and even, her hand still wrapped around the juice box Sofia gave her. She looks peaceful in a way that children should always look. Aleandro carries his daughter to the car with the tenderness of someone learning gentleness for the first time. His men wait by the black SUV, pretending not to notice the careful way he lowers Emma into her car seat, the way he smooths her hair from her forehead. He returns to Sofia's apartment. The footsteps on the stairs are slow, deliberate. He stands in her doorway in a way that makes her heart pound with a feeling that isn't fear. "I need to tell you something," he says. His voice is rough around the edges, like gravel. "Okay," Sofia whispers. "That night outside the restaurant, when I saw him grab you." Aleandro pauses. The fluorescent hallway light behind him casts his face in shadow. "I saw my father. I saw every moment he raised his hand to me. I saw the fear I used to feel. And I couldn't let it happen. Not to you." Sofia steps closer. The distance between them shrinks to something almost unbearable. "You saved me," she says. "No." His voice cuts through the apartment like a blade. "You saved yourself. You ran from Douglas. You survived 8 years. You still had kindness left to give my daughter. That is not me saving you. That is you being stronger than you know." They stand in her doorway, two people who understood darkness intimately, who knew that survival is not weakness but a kind of fierce, quiet strength. "I would like to see you again," Aleandro says. "Not because you helped Emma. Because I want to." Sofia's answer is barely audible. "I would like that too." The healing doesn't happen overnight. Trust is built in coffee conversations and Saturday mornings and the small confessions that arrive between silence. Two people who saved each other on the worst nights of their lives discover that darkness shared is darkness halved. That when you give someone the truth of who you are, they don't always run. 6 months later. Spring has broken through San Francisco's fog like a secret finally told. The morning is warm in a way that makes Sofia want to shed layers, to let the sun touch skin that spent too many years covered in bruises and shame. She sits on a park bench watching Emma play on the same playground where everything changed. The same swings. The same slide worn smooth by 1,000 small hands. But Sofia is different now. The scars on her back still exist, they always will, mapped into her skin like permanent reminders. But they no longer define the entire landscape of who she is. She wears a simple dress. Her hair falls loose around her shoulders. Her posture is straight because she no longer needs to make herself invisible. From her purse, she pulls out something she has carried for 12 years. A child's first pair of shoes, tiny and soft, worn at the heels from months of learning to walk. Baby shoes that belonged to her daughter. The daughter she held for 6 hours before the hospital staff took her away. The daughter she has mourned in silence for over a decade. She looks at the shoes for a long moment. She remembers the girl she was, young, hopeful, not yet broken. She honors the baby she lost. She acknowledges the woman she became through the act of surviving that loss. Then she places the shoes gently in the trash can beside the bench. Some things we carry to survive. Some things we release to live. Aleandro sits beside her. He doesn't ask about the shoes. He understands that some burdens are laid down in silence, that some losses are too large for words. "Sofia, come push me on the swings." Emma's voice cuts through the park, bright as a bell. Sofia stands. Takes Emma's hand. Walks away toward the playground where her life once hung in the balance and a crime boss recognized his own reflection in her fear. Aleandro watches them go. The man who built an empire from violence, who ordered men into darkness, who made enemies disappear without trace, this man feels something he hasn't felt in 15 years. Peace. Sofia learned that worth is not measured in dollar amounts. $34 means nothing. $35,000 means nothing. Compared to the value of showing up for someone who needs you, these numbers are dust. She learned that the men who hurt you do not get to write your ending. They do not get to decide what you become. She learned that salvation comes from the most unexpected places. From a crime boss who saw his own pain reflected in her eyes. From a child who needed gentle hands. From the courage to accept help after years of refusing it. And she learned what Aleandro's mother told him long ago, words he whispered to her on a night when she couldn't stop trembling. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. If this story moved your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow we have another story that will change how you see the world. Leave a comment below. Tell us, what would you have done in Sofia's position? Your story matters. We want to hear it. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. See you tomorrow.